On page 13 of the book Ideologies in Education, Unmasking the Trap of Teacher Neutrality, Lilia Bartolomé defined ideology as the framework of thought constructed and held by members of society to justify or rationalize an existing social order.
That makes sense, Dr. Smith, but can you give me an example?
Of course, Susan. Some school districts, such as the Montclair Board of Education, place students into tracks to group them together by academic achievement levels. Students in higher-level tracks take more academically challenging classes while students in lower tracks take less challenging classes. Some people, such as the administrator in the video Off-Track Educational Privilege for All, believe this is detrimental to student academic and social development because students in one track may not have the opportunity to interact with students from another track.
Okay, but how does that relate to Ms. Bartolomé's definition of ideology?
Well, Susan, tracking can be used to preserve the status quo by justifying the placement of certain students into certain groups. In the video, for example, students believed that the higher tracks were composed mainly of white students, while the lower tracks were mainly Hispanic and African American. Based on your understanding of ideology, what conclusion would you draw?
Well, Dr. Smith, I would say that the goal of tracking is to give white students an academic advantage over other students.
Excellent, Susan. Why would the school administrators want to eliminate the tracking system for world literature?
It seems to me that, if you remove the barriers tracking places on students, they will have the opportunity to work with other students and teachers. But I don't understand how this fits the notion of hegemonic ideology.
That is a good question, Susan. But first, can you tell me what hegemonic ideology is?
Well, it's the rationalization of the status quo by the ruling or dominant class.
Okay. So how does tracking preserve hegemonic ideology?
Assuming that white students are in the highest tracks, and that Hispanic and African American students are in the lowest tracks, wouldn't this tend to perpetuate the notion that white students are more likely to achieve academic success than students of other groups? If I remember my history, the idea of white superiority is the status quo.
Aha. So how would tracking affect hegemonic ideology?
If you mix the students up into new classes, they would not be separated into groups by perceived achievement levels, and perhaps Hispanic and African American students would have the chance to succeed, and white students would have the opportunity to meet new students who have different perspectives and experiences.
Excellent, Susan. I think you've got it. Now let's look at what some teacher candidates think about this issue. So, Susan, what do you think about the teacher candidates' opinions?
I think they were very interesting, Dr. Smith. I think they show that candidates believe that these factors are important when considering the issue of ideology. But I noticed that something was missing from the survey.
What was that, Susan?
The tracked world literature class was new, right?
Right.
The teacher candidate who put the survey together forgot to include a question about the novelty factor. Perhaps the enthusiasm and passion came from the fact that the class was new, and not from the teachers and students themselves.
That is well worth considering, Susan. Perhaps you might do a follow-up as part of your dissertation. Now if you'll excuse me, I've got to meet Dr. Hershey for lunch. I hear she's got some interesting plans for next term.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Have a good lunch.